Welcome everyone to the Farm Futures Business Summit, the virtual sessions. I'm Mike Wilson. I'm executive editor of Farm Futures, and we're pleased to have you here. And we'd also like to say a big welcome to Roger McEowen, our guest today. He's the Ag Law Professor at Washburn University. Roger is the Professor of Ag Law and Taxation at Washburn University School of Law in Topeka, Kansas. And through 2015, he was the Leonard Dolezal Professor in Ag Law at Iowa State University. And before joining Iowa State in 2004, he was an Associate Professor of Ag Law and Extension Specialist at Kansas State. His Ag Law and Taxation blog, part of the Law Professor Blogs Network, is the most widely read Ag Law and Taxation blog online. So welcome, Professor, and I hope you're doing well today.
Thank you. Good to be with you. Yes, just fine.
Roger, we're looking forward to having you at the summit, and we're going to be discussing taxes, which is something nobody really wants to talk about, but everybody obviously has to know about. And there's a lot of things going on with taxes these days, or at least maybe. It seems like with a new administration, you always have some anxiety over what's going to happen. So maybe you could talk a little bit right now about what your session will be about, and we can get into a few questions for our virtual audience.
Well, thank you, Mike. It's good to talk about these things and kind of preface what that hour session is going to be like in June. And what I'm going to be talking about is tax management. How do we protect the farm assets now and in the future, and what's the best tax strategy moving forward? Because as I remind my students in law school in particular, as well as the undergraduate students, the proper tax management is a real key to having a profitable farming operation. You can manage to make mistakes that become very, very costly. And I think farmers are really good at marketing. They're good at knowing what crops to plant. They're good at understanding the federal farm programs. Where they're not as good at, because it's difficult and it's tough. It's really hard. And it's not to say the other aspects of this are not hard. It's just we're more used to dealing with marketing issues. We're used to dealing with cropping decisions. We have a lot of extension type programs that are available for farmers. When you get into the nuts and bolts of tax management, boy, that's just hard stuff. And a lot of farmers will say, tax, that's one of those things I want to put off. But if we don't do it right, there's a lot of leakage that can really cause economic harm to the business. So that's what I want to focus on in that hour session is, what do we do now, given the proposed changes that are on the table? And as you said, we might see them, we might not see them. Maybe we may see some of them. We may see enactments in a different form than they currently are. So all that I'll be able to do is, when we get to the conference in June, is give the lay of the land as it is that day, and just kind of project forward what the new rules might be. And then what are the planning options that are available to us given what we think might be coming?
Well, we don't want to obviously speculate too much, but from the get-go, since January, you've been seeing stories about farmers feeling pretty dubious about what's going to happen. I don't know. I think it's partly a political thing, but then you've got this American Families Plan that we just heard about a couple weeks ago, I guess, and supposedly that's going to be giving family businesses some relief when it comes to possible changes in stepped up basis and capital gains. You want to talk a little bit about what you've been reading about that and what that might mean to farmers?
Well, in fact, I just posted a blog article today as we tape this, dealing with that. I made a comment in there. I was primarily talking about the STEP Act that has been proposed, but I did mention in there that I hadn't detailed out the American Families Plan Act, other than to say that what the USDA put out in late April with respect to that, saying that this is a good thing for America's farms and ranches, is incredibly misleading. Because to get the estate tax benefits, well, it's misleading on 2 points. To get the estate tax benefits, where they say that the America's Families Plan will only impact 2% of the nation's farms and ranches. The farm or the ranch has to be left to the family, to qualified heirs, and they must materially participate in farming. You can't cash rent it. You have to be farming it. And then what they don't say is even more devastating, and that is in the American Families Plan, you will lose a lot of deductions. So while the provisions in that will only impact what they say is true as long as the family continues to farm, 2% of the farms and ranches in the country, what they don't say is the loss of the income tax deductions, which will create a significantly higher tax bill for many farms and ranches across the country. And that's really the onerous thing that is in the American Families Plan. And I'll be detailing that as we go through that. So, and it's on the surface, what USDA says is correct. But when you dig under the surface, you see a lot of things there that can increase the tax bill. And that's why, as I said earlier, this stuff is difficult. It's difficult to understand the tax code, let alone know how to apply the rules as they seem to constantly change under our feet as we try to do planning for clients. So that's what I want to focus on at this conference.
Well, it does sound it sounds worrisome. What about your estate planning? These days, people have been encouraged to do more and more estate planning to try and make sure that the plan, whatever plan they come up with, is actually successful. Right. Do we need to start getting back in touch with our estate planning folks and make sure that we're all on the same page? Do we need to start making new plans? Are there other options?
Yeah, and again, in my article posted May 10, which is the day that we're taping this, I talk about that as I go through this STEP Act. And again, we're back to this situation where if these things actually become law, then what are our options? One of the most onerous provisions in the STEP Act, which is just a proposal at this point in time. It's not really in bill format yet, although it's drafted as a bill. They haven't really started pounding it through Congress yet. But it does have a provision in there that's really, as I said, onerous, and that is it's retroactively effective back to January 1 of this year. Well, if that's the case, then that forecloses a lot of planning that we could do to get ready for it because the rules would already be in place. Well, what am I talking about there? One is a rule that would take the enhanced capital gain rate, which is basically doubled under a different provision, under a different proposal that's out there, and apply that at the time of a transfer, not waiting until the heirs who receive the property at death sell the property. No, when the grantor of a trust transfers the property into a trust other than for the surviving spouse or makes an outright transfer, we tax the unappreciated gain on that property at that point in time, rather than waiting. Even if we didn't have step-up basis, the enhanced capital gain rate on that appreciation in value wouldn't apply until the heirs sell it. Well, they're covering both bases here, taking away step-up basis and then saying, well, we're not going to wait and see if the heirs sell the property. We're going to tax it up front at the time of the transfer. Those two pieces together are really rough. Now, the American Families Plan says, well, if you're a farm, up to a certain extent, you can escape those problems. But again, as I said, the farm has to stay in the family and the heirs have to be materially participating in farming to get that benefit, to get around those rules. One of the things I do mention is that the new grantor trust rules, where I create, say, a revocable trust, those types of things, don't apply for trusts that are left for the benefit of the surviving spouse, where the property is put in trust for the benefit of the surviving spouse. That does give us some angles there. And as I mentioned in my piece today, they haven't caught a couple of these things that I'm mentioning. And so I'm hoping that my article doesn't give them ideas that they don't otherwise have at this point in time. But to answer your question directly, I think yes. Once we get past tax season, then it's time to start talking to those tax practitioners, to those estate planning attorneys that also do tax. Let them get through the tax season and then start talking to them about reviewing an existing estate plan. Is my drafting language in wills and trusts flexible enough so that I can adjust as easily as I can to changes that might be coming. So are we using such things as disclaimer language in wills and trusts? Are we using some rather complicated language that doesn't tie us in to one set of laws or the other? We have to be flexible to be able to adjust kind of on the fly. And there are some things that we can do from a planning standpoint that will aid us in that process.
Roger, can you tell everyone what this website is where they can get your blog?
Sure. You can go to my homepage, which is, well, there are two ways to do it. Just do an internet search for Washburn Walter, WALTR, and you'll find it. It'll be Washburn Agricultural Law and Tax Report. The actual address is washburnlaw.edu/Walter, WALTR. And then on that homepage down the left-hand side, as you scroll through some of the topics that are there, you'll find the Agricultural Law and Taxation blog as part of the Law Professors Blog Network. And you can click on that, it'll take you to it. There's also a link to sign up for an email alert whenever I add something to it.
Great. Well, I'll be signing up. Roger, I know these are tough issues, and you're the right person to be coming to the summit and trying to unravel this whole complicated issue. And we are really looking forward to seeing you there in June 16th and 17th at the Coralville Marriott Hotel in Iowa, near Iowa City. And thank you today, Roger, for your insights, and thank you all for joining us at our virtual session today. This has been Mike Wilson with Farm Futures, the executive editor of Farm Futures, and we thank you for being with us.